everybody. Doug Pfeiffer from the Resilient Purpose Podcast. Wanted to come back for another summer burst episode. Today we're going to talk about resilience, and I really want to continue to build off of resilience, the topic we've been covering over the last several episodes, and really kind of capitalize on this idea that, health and wellness and healing is within us. There are actually practical things that we can do, steps that we can take to become resilient, to be healthy. And a lot of these are not asking something that is out of our capacity to accomplish. And so that's really important to understand that, even taking small steps can build this resilience. But I really wanted to focus on this effort, get this information out to everybody, because this is really important information. This is information that has been around for, number of years, that we've learned about resilience and that we really need to keep highlighting so that people recognize that there are things that we can do to be mentally healthy and to build resilience. So one of the things that was several months ago, I was in my basement. I don't remember why, but I have a bookshelf filled with, I have so many books and resources related to behavioral health and the things in the current job that I'm in, that I don't actually have all of that stuff in my office. They're actually just kind of loaded up in the basement. And one of the things I came across was this magazine, The Scientific American Mind. And there's an article, True Grit, 6 science-tested tips for building your resilience. And so this was an article. I'm like, I really need to kind of see what that says, because we've been talking a lot about resilience and wanted to kind of figure out, is this kind of consistent with what we talk about today? And in fact, when I read through the article, I'm like, wow, this is like a lot of what we talk about, and consistent about what, we keep seeing today, what other experts are talking about. I mean, a lot of this, and as it says, it's science tested, means it's been through research. And, we're finding that, when people do these things, it helps build resilience. So let's talk about this article. Let's figure out kind of what it says. So one of the things in the article that really starts to talk about was kind of like, how do we define resilience and why is resilience important? Well, let's start with why resilience is important. It's because and what we know about mental health problems is that when chronic stress, if we live in a world of chronic stress and that chronic stress goes unchecked, meaning we don't address it, we kind of don't pay attention to it, and we just kind of continue to maintain in this chronic stress environment, it will impair a lot of our systems in our body, not just our brain, not just our mind, not just our mental health, but even our physical health. One of the major impact of stress is on our immune system. It shuts down our immune system. And one of the kind of concepts around that is, if you're being chased by a tiger, you're trying to fight off a cold is really not your highest priority. So it limits it when we're in stress, when our brain thinks that we're, needing to survive and we're in a state of survival, it kind of shuts down those things that it considers non-essential for the moment. Yes, we need our immune system to fight off disease and things like that. But in the moment when our brain thinks that we're actively being threatened for our life, we tend to shut those systems down because they're not necessarily necessary. The other system that it really affects is our digestive system, because you know what? Digesting a cheeseburger that we ate really doesn't matter when we're being chased by a tiger, right? Our primary purpose is just to get away. So if we can put all of our energy into that survival mode, then that gives us the best chance to survive. Now, the problem with that is oftentimes we're in those states when we're not being chased by a tiger. We're in situations that our brain has been triggered because of past traumas, past adversities, and it becomes so sensitized to stress that the system gets really overworked. And so it starts to interpret this current situation as being a need to survive, like you're being chased by the tiger. So leads to things like ulcers and asthma and depression and diabetes and heart disease. And in fact, if we talk about the ACEs study that is popular and being talked about a lot, early life expectancy, reduced life expectancy happens when we live in a chronic state of, that chronic stress can lead to unhealthy behaviors and actions. And in our attempt to adapt to that stress, we often turn to things that are what we would consider maladaptive. They're probably effective for that person in that moment, but they lead to a whole host of all other problems when we engage in substance use, smoking, and things like that. So stress really kind of affects the whole person when it goes unchecked. And it's really not necessarily stress by itself, but the type of stress and the way we experience that stress, the size of the stress, the pattern in which we receive that stress, that can lead to these hosts of health problems and issues that we're seeing. So, but what is resilience then? So if we kind of know that stress is, stress, and at least in the way we experience stress, can be unhealthy for us when it's left unchecked and when we don't address it. What is resilience? Well, resilience is our ability to respond and adapt to stress in our environment, in our experience. Our brain has this really marvelous ability to adapt to its experience and learn from experience. And so when we kind of fail to do that, when we fail to adapt in these healthy ways, we become very vulnerable. And what we're trying to create, especially when people come to therapy, or when just people are seeking out their own wellness, is how do we help people deal with stress in a more resilient way? How do we help people respond and adapt to stress? How do we view stress, the mindset, things like that allow us for us to not be overwhelmed by the stress and allow our systems to do what it's designed to do, which is to learn from that stress and perform better the next time and to prepare for it. So, and in fact, according to this article, the article about science-tested resilience strategies, more than education, like our education level, more than our life experience, more than training that we get from a job or school, a person's level of resilience is what really determines who succeeds and who fails, regardless of the setting or the situation. So it's not being valedictorian. It's not being the greatest athlete in the world. It is our ability to be resilient, our ability to handle stress, our ability to tolerate what's thrown at us, and in fact, be able to kind of look at it, evaluate it, and learn from it is really what we're trying to help people see. So, and really, you can't have resilience without stress. So there's a strong stress and resilience connection. So in order to be resilient, we have to be stressful. So, you just heard me in the beginning of this episode, we're talking about, well, stress can be bad. And there's these, if it goes unchecked, there's going to be a whole host of problems, which is true, but stress inherently is not bad. We talk in Dr. Perry's work, the pattern of stress. So if it's unpredictable, it's severe, and it's prolonged, it's going to create vulnerability in our stress response system. However, if it is predictable and we have some element of control in it, and the dose is of a moderate level where it stretches us and doesn't overwhelm us, then we build resilience. So the key is the pattern in which we experience the stress, and then what can we do to deal with stress on an ongoing basis. Because I know, like, in my job, it's stressful a lot. Like, there's not really a week that goes by that I'm not really stressed in some way. Not in the overwhelmed, I'm going to really, have major health problems because of it. But my stress response system gets activated because, there's just a lot of things to be stressful about in this world. So, we can't escape stress. So we have to learn how to face stress. So a resilient person is not someone who avoids stress. It's somebody who faces the stress and learns how to master and tame the stress. And so that's the key. I think a lot of times when people come to therapy, they want to go to therapy, but they're really scared about facing those stressors that really cause and link to those mental health problems that they're coming in for. The best way to overcome our mental health problems is to face those stressors and to tame those stressors. So there are some genetic traits to stress and resilience. Some people just are born very hardy and resilient. They just, for whatever reason, their DNA makes them very resilient. There are some people that are born with vulnerable stress response systems, so they're born to be vulnerable. And that's based on generations of family experience, their parents and their parents' parents, and those life experiences that have shaped their stress response systems. And some people most people are born with typical stress response systems. I would imagine that things kind of work out like a bell curve that you probably learned about in school. So research has highlighted certain traits that are associated with resilience, and it was highlighted in this article. One was just our temperament, and you think about, are we very reactive? If you have an even temperament, if you have a mild temperament, your ability to kind of take in information and not be overreactive to it is a huge role in terms of how resilient we are. Our willingness to take on novel tasks, so our willingness, our excitement in terms of learning new things and taking on those tasks are important in terms of building resilience, which makes sense because to build resilience we have to have doses of stress. So when we take on novelty, we are taking on doses of stress, because anything that is new or novel is a stressor. Even if it's really cool newness, like if you're going to a concert for a first time, it is going to activate our stress response system, even though that might be really exciting. But our ability to tolerate the big crowds, the loud music, all those types of things, that's going to be stressful on our system. And so how we handle that, how we respond to that, can either build resilience or be very vulnerable for us. A simple, taking my 5-year-old to a heavy metal Metallica concert would be quite overwhelming for my 5-year-old. Going with friends to a Metallica concert, not going to be so overwhelming typically, and so we'll be able to handle that stress. So what is developmentally relevant in terms of stress is also important here. Along that is our willingness to interact with unfamiliar people. Is also something that is very resilient, because I think resilience and vulnerability is often very tied to our relational network, our relational health. I believe that our ability to be resilient has a lot to do with our relational support network. So the more relationships we have, the more healthy relationships we have, the more resilient we're going to be. Another thing is that we're just good natured. We're likable. We're caring people. We're good natured. We want to help people. Those are going to be things. Social folks, social personalities are very helpful in terms of resilience. And then our ability, and I think this is crucial, our ability to accept who we are, and that includes our faults. So take the good with the bad. Take the bad with the good, is going to determine resilience. So I think a lot of that has to do with our ability to look at our faults as learning opportunities and teachable moments. So those are really important concepts to kind of recognize, that our ability to accept the things that we are not really excited about in ourselves, but in a way of, it doesn't make us a bad person. It just means that this is something that I need to get better at, or I want to get better at, or that I really think would be a good focus for my efforts. And I think there's a key difference. Our faults don't define us as bad people. Our faults are things that maybe relate to lagging skills in ourselves that we need to build in ourselves. So I think those often are concepts that we have to think about when we're trying to get better, trying to build our mental health. Is can we turn the corner in terms of, for a number of years, for many of us, we've had intense shame regarding our faults. Can we change our perspective on this and start to recognize that our faults are not about us being bad people, but about things that we could get better at, areas of growth. Adam Grant, who is a psychologist and professor at Penn University, and his big focus is in kind of workplace psychology, and focusing on I think his most recent book was Think Again. So it is frequently evaluating ourselves and the things that we do, and do we need to rethink things? Do we need to take a different look at what we've always done? and say, hey, we don't always get it right. And, but that's okay, because, every time that we have an opportunity to rethink something, we can make things better. So going along with that, to become resilient, we have to face stress. But when we activate that stress, if we can face that stress in more controlled and predictable ways, we'll be able to tolerate that stress a lot better. So it doesn't mean that you go around and just try to, don't plan out the stress. You don't just kind of, try to live a life of craziness and chaos because that's what you were, thought that, I got to face stress. No, it's seeking out stress in very predictable and moderate ways. And how can we do that? How can we create stress for ourselves, but in a very tolerable and predictable way? And we have elements of control, so, and there's different things that I think we won't really talk about today, but that we can, do to help with that. So, the other thing is if you want to, build resilience, the more we activate specific brain areas through our behavior, the more neural connections form in those areas. And so that enables the neurons to communicate more effectively. So if we want to get better at a certain task of, being better at paperwork at your job or learning how to meet new people, you really can't build that resilience in terms of being more social with people that we don't know until you actually go out there and socialize with people you don't know. So in order to change our ability to be more social with people, we have to have the opportunity to activate that part of the brain so that we can get better at it. That doesn't mean that we don't plan and prepare and strategize and maybe build some foundational skills to like for example, how do I start a conversation? How do I introduce myself? What do we talk about when I meet somebody new? Things like that. Those might be things that need to be worked out beforehand, but still, to build that skill within yourself, to build that resilience, we have to create opportunity. Would you ever let your 16-year-old kid drive a car without any or get a license without giving them any driver training? Would you just give them a book to read and expect them to know how to drive a car? No, you have to get in there. You have to give them the opportunity to be able to drive the car. Well, this is true in mental health work, in resilience work, is we have to give them the opportunity to face these stressors in a controlled and predictable way. So, what are those 6 ways to build resilience that are science tested? So let's talk about them. The first one is to regulate our emotions. Now, you hear me talk about this all the time. Regulate. The enemy to resilience is going to be dysregulation. So we have to take our opportunities to regulate our emotions. So according to psychologist Barbara Fredrickson out of UNC, negative emotions tend to increase our physiological arousal. They narrow our focus or attention, and they restrict our behaviors to behaviors that are related to our survival. So they really limit our choices, limit our options in terms of how we face a stress or face a problem. However, positive emotions tend to reduce our physiological arousal. They actually broaden our focus, and they lead to more creative and flexible responses. So when we are about to face stressful situations, when we regulate our emotions or regulate ourselves, we are in a better position to face the problems. So oftentimes, if you're in a meeting at work and all of a sudden you get this news that's going to create this really major problem that you have to figure out, understand that you're probably going to get dysregulated in that moment. So that's actually the worst time that you have to make a decision. So you have to do something to go regulate. Maybe you need to go take a walk. Maybe you need to go talk to a friend. Maybe you need to just go to the gym and work out and then come back to try to solve that problem. So the timing of when you have to face that stress are really important, because if you are facing stress when you're dysregulated, you're going to often have problems related to that. You're going to make the situation worse. So that's really important. The other thing about in terms of regulating our emotions, and that is a concept called cognitive reappraisal. So if we can change the way we look at adversity, seeing adversity and stress as an opportunity, seeing it as a teachable moment, how can I look at a difficult situation in a way that's going to help me? That's going to lead to more optimism, that's going to lead to more hope, and that's going to help us handle stress a lot more, and we'll be more regulated when we do face stress. If I have experience of overcoming adversity and managing stressful situations in a healthy way, then my brain is trained to know that I can do this. So I have hope and I have confidence. And so hope is really built from previous experience with a situation. So, hope in therapy comes from having experience of good therapy sessions. And that gives people hope that things can get better. Giving people the opportunity to experience stress and then regulate and be healthy from it actually gives people hope that, hey, I can actually get better. I can be healthy in there. So is there other ways to kind of think about a situation? Is there a less destructive way that I can look at this? Am I catastrophizing or exaggerating its potential negative impact? Am I blowing this out of proportion? Let's try to put this into perspective and see, what does this stressor really mean for my life right now? And is this something that I can learn from this experience? Is it something that can help me be stronger from this experience? And that's going to be really important. The other thing to kind of help with regulating the emotion that this article talks about, but is very popular in today's society, is mindfulness meditation. Regularly engaging in activities that keep you in the present moment, the here and now, the right now. Like one of the strategies we talk about with people dealing with trauma is, in those situations, asking yourself, am I safe right here, right now? And then engaging in a grounding technique to keep people in the present moment. So if I can stay in the present moment, then there's a better chance that I'm going to be able to respond to that stress in a healthy way. Because typically stress is a result of something that has happened in the past or something that I'm expecting to happen in the future. So if I stay in the present, then my stress goes down because I'm focusing on things that I can control and focus on and actually do something about. There's a lot of things I can't do about something that is expected to happen in the future, and there's a lot of things that I can't do anything about things that have happened in the past. So how can I stay in that present moment and do something that I have control over? And that's a great way to build resilience. One of the things that I know gets talked about a lot, especially in therapy, you probably hear this advice or suggestions from therapists all the time, but just in general, our ability to take care of ourselves physically is really important in resilience. In fact, when you do exercise and when you work out in certain types of ways, if you do it in pattern, predictable, and in moderate doses of exercise, where you have control over it, you actually are building a resilient stress response system. So the same mechanisms of stress that are activated in a workout are the same that get activated in kind of emotional stress. So all these systems kind of overlap and work together. So physical activity can enhance our resilience by protecting us from the negative experience of stress. So it's a great way to get rid of stress. One of my favorite tools in regulating is progressive muscle relaxation. So I'm engaging my muscles and I'm tensing them and then releasing them. So that is hugely helpful. There's a lot of different activities we do in therapy related to the release of that physical stress. Physical activity from a neuroscience, from a biological perspective, is an activity that boosts our endorphins, our feel-good chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, the things that help keep us regulated, and it suppresses the impact of stress hormones like cortisol, at least the negative impacts of cortisol. And so this then will, of course, lead to less depression and less elevation of mood. If you really want to read a good book about the impact of stress or impact of exercise on mental health or stress in general, read Spark by John Rady. And he talks about this, is that physical exercise activates genes for proteins such as a protein called BDNF, which is stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, so growth proteins in our brain. So it promotes growth and repair of neurons in our brain, and this is often damaged by prolonged stress. So these hormones, these neurons, are damaged from prolonged stress. The exercise actually bolsters these neurons, creates new neurons, helps strengthen those neural pathways that we need to live a healthier life. So, and then taking care of yourself physically should stress. We think of kind of stress going back to this concept of just manageable difficulties. So there's a concept called stress inoculation, meaning you stress and gradually increase the intensity of dose of stress. So you want to kind of build your tolerance of stress by gradually increasing the dose of stress that you use in physical exercise. So you don't start with the greatest amount of stress. You start at a just manageable level of stress and then continue to kind of increase that dose of stress so that you can build that tolerance and resilience. Now, the key, though, is to remember that rest and recovery is important. So the higher intensity of stress, the more rest and recovery that you will need. So, don't do these things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You need to have rest. In fact, there's concept in neuroscience where this refractory period where there are times where these neurons just don't fire. They just kind of just deactivate in terms of their need to rest and recover and consolidate and just really kind of reorganize so that it can be more efficient and more effective as a neural pathway. So we sometimes are trying to activate those neurons in a refractory period, which leads to no effectiveness. So making sure that we provide that rest and recovery in the work that we do for ourselves. That's mental health. I mean, sometimes you just need a day off from therapy, right? You need to kind of have rest and recovery. If you're in school and you're studying and working really hard academically, so you just need those opportunities to rest and recover. So any times that we're frequently trying to activate that stress response in a predictable and moderate and controlled way, we still need rest and recovery. We still need opportunities to take a break from that stress. The third, there's a lot of things that are kind of built in with these 6 steps or tips for building resilience. And so a lot of these are built within these things. But the last thing I wanted to talk about was creating a support network. So we know that our brain is a social brain, that we have survived as a species to this day because of our ability to have connections with others. Our survival is based on our ability to connect with other human beings, to procreate, to pass on our genetics to the next generation. So it really requires our ability to have a social network, to be connected to other people. So connection actually dampens our stress response. So relational health is a really critical factor in our ability to deal with mental health problems. So high levels of social support is associated with psychological wellness. Connection, one of the cool things about connection is it releases a chemical called oxytocin, which is our bonding hormone. And so when oxytocin is released, it makes us feel good and it calms our brain. It reduces anxiety and fear. So when we are with caring, safe, trustworthy people, it calms our brain. It creates that sense of relaxation, right? And you can probably relate to that those times when you're with your really good friends and how good that feels to kind of hang out. Recently, we went over a friend's house and spent time with them and grilled out and just really had a great time, man. I had oxytocin releasing that whole time. It was great, and we were feeling really good. And those are really important. It just really rejuvenated me in that moment to be able to really reconnect with old friends and just be families together, interacting. And that's just a great feeling. So social network, social connections, not social network in terms of Facebook and Instagram. That's not the type of connection I am talking about. The connection of being out in real life with people interacting with people, you know, even a phone call, things like that, but just being able to dialogue and interact with people in, you know, healthy ways. So, finding supports that are also resilient. So this is one of the other factors that it talks about. The supports that you gain, you know, having role models of resilience is a great way to build resilience in yourself. So if you actually have relational health with people that are resilient themselves, that actually is going to lead to resilience within you. So that builds your resilience. So that's a really, you know, cool thing. So in your support network, who do you connect with daily? So do you reach out to people on a daily basis to connect with people? Maybe that's at your work, maybe that's at school, maybe that's just you reaching out to your friends in the neighborhood. But, you know, how do you connect with people on a daily basis? Who would help you without hesitation? Do you have somebody in your life that would help you without hesitation? If you were having a bad day and you called them up, would they go out with you to hang out? At, you know, moment's notice? Would they say, hey, I got to go help out my friend, they're having a bad day, I'll be back? You know, do they, you know, support you in those moments? Who really understands you, and who can you count on a daily basis? So who are those people? Who are those people that lift you up? Who are those people that are dependable, that are reliable, to support you? Do you have a support network, and do you identify them specifically as people of support? Do you have conversations with them of like, you're a really good support for me, you know, would love to be able to reach out to you when I'm having a bad day? Is that something that you're willing or you're okay with? Is a really great thing. So I want you to just kind of think about, how can I build my therapeutic web and just expand that therapeutic web, build layers and layers of relationships that can really support my overall wellness. Okay, so that's a lot of information, but guess what? It's on video, so you can rewind it, you can play it back. If you like something I said, you can write it down. You can just play it over and over again. If you like the sound of my voice, that can also be very helpful too. Either way, there's a lot of information about this article. If you want to actually know where to find the article, I can copy the article. You'll have my chicken scratch in there, and send it your way, or I'll just give you the issue, maybe put the issue in the show notes, and let people know about that, and so that people can read it for themselves. But I hope you find this helpful. I hope that you can do at least one of these things to build your resilience, and just, you know, check out any of our videos to learn more about how we can better take care of our mental health. So take care, everybody. Stay regulated out there. Do things that are going to help yourself feel better, that are healthy.